Welcome back, everyone, to the NES Archive, where we're taking a look at the North American NES library, one game at a time. Today's game was originally released on the NES on October 18th, 1985, and the game is Excitebike. This game was part of the programmable series, which included Wrecking Crew and Mach Rider. Excitebike was a motocross racing game, and one of the staples in my household. The game was definitely responsible for many cases of the dreaded Nintendo thumb, as we tried to hold down the buttons as hard as we could, as if that was actually going to do anything to make us go faster. We couldn't help it, though. The tagline for the game was design your own motocross course for a different racing challenge every time. I love reading the back of boxes of old games, and Excitebike's box read, "This thrilling Nintendo programmable game lets you vary the obstacles, change the sequence of events, and increase the racing challenge time and time again. You'll start out in a Nintendo-designed preliminary race and move through a series of increasingly difficult challenge races. You'll face crazy curves, hairpin turns, daredevil jumps, and some very fierce motocross competition as you race your bike toward the checkered flag. This thrilling test of driving strategies and skill will keep you riveted to the screen for hours." And I'm here to tell you it did. Excitebike was developed by Nintendo R&D1 and had a design team that included programmer Toshihiko Nakago, graphic designers Minoru Maeda and Takashi Tezuka, music composer Akito Nakatsuka, and music programmer Yukio Kaneoka. Among them, they are credited with games like Ice Climbers, Persona 5, ARMS, Brain Age, F-Zero, and to top it all off, the director of the game was Shigeru Miyamoto. Every gamer knows who he is. He was responsible for Donkey Kong, Super Mario, Zelda, Pikmin, Star Fox. The list just keeps going on. He's one of my personal heroes. Excitebike had solo races as well as races against AI. There was no two-player head-to-head option. You raced from left to right, and you had to go over and around obstacles like puddles and sandbags and mud pits. And of course, you had to avoid the other racers. If you ran into the other racers, you would be knocked off of your bike, and then you had to run back to your bike on the side and start over. And this really slowed things down. Avoiding all of these things took a lot of skill, and you had to do this with as much speed as you could while avoiding overheating your engine. You had two throttle buttons. One was slow but wouldn't overheat your engine. The other was much faster but would quickly fill up the temperature gauge. And if you filled up that gauge, your bike would pull off to the side of the track to cool off, and you would be rewarded or punished with the most annoying sound in gaming history. In addition to racing, you could also create your own tracks in the editor mode. It was fun to race on tracks that friends or siblings had created, but the creation process was really limited by the inputs on the controller, and overall it just felt really tedious to make anything. On top of this, the NES version of the game, if you switched off your console, you lost the courses, so there was no way to save them. You'd have to make them all over again. And in a house where your parents are like, all right, you got to go do something, you got to shut it off because you don't want to waste electricity, that meant you lost a lot of work. However, in the original Famicom version, it is possible to save your games because the system allows you to write to a disk and actually use disks. And even though this is impossible in the North American Nintendo Entertainment System, the manual still said that you could, just in case they added something on later down the road, which unfortunately they never did. However, later on, when there was a 3D version of the game released on the 3DS, you could finally save your levels. I think it was up to 32 of them, and the game was actually a free download for the first month, which is pretty rad. The game was also one of 30 games released on the NES Classic, which everybody knows was just about impossible to get your hands on. I got lucky and was able to find two of them, one for me and one for my brother-in-law. But you know, there's a lot of people who never got their hands on these things. And I will tell you this, Excitebike is one of the first games that I launched when I got my hands on my NES Classic. There was also a Satellaview version of the game, which if you don't know what that is, Satellaview was this service that you could subscribe to in Japan for the Super Nintendo. Basically, there would be certain times where you could download a game from the satellite and play it on your Super Nintendo. I think you could only play it for those certain amount of time. This one replaced the human riders with characters like Mario and Luigi and Princess Peach and Wario, etc. This is a version of the game that I really wish I could get my hands on. I've never played it, and it feels like a shame. It should have been released on the SNES Classic, or at least something in the Virtual Console. When I was a kid, my brothers and I didn't do much with the Excitebike's level editor because you couldn't save and it was tedious to make the levels. But I remember spending lots of time playing our Atari ST and making levels for Lode Runner. So I guess my question to you guys is, what are some of your favorite games where you could design your own levels? Let me know. Well, that's it for this episode of NES Classic. If you are interested in getting these episodes early, make sure you check out the Patreon. Until next time, bye-bye.